Good evening from Meditation Mount here in Ojai, California, and welcome everyone to the May broadcast of View from the Mount. So let's begin as we normally do by bringing ourselves present and by creating a magnetic field of receptivity so that together we can receive inspiration and new insights so that these gifts may flow and guide us. We do this by breathing gently and releasing any tension that may be held, first of all, in our physical body. Just release, relax. And as we continue to breathe gently, we release any tension in our feeling or emotional body. Allowing any waves to subside so that we have a calm and peaceful inner life. And we breathe out any tensions that may be held within our mental body, our mind, any extraneous thoughts that may be flying around. Allow them simply to dissolve, to dissipate, to disappear, so that our mind is clear, serene, and receptive. And now let us enter the silent space of the heart and become aware of the pulse of life, the beating of our heart, the connection we have with life. And we connect heart to heart to heart. And we weave together a group chalice that is receptive to impression and insights from the overlighting soul. And then let us return from this inner peaceful state to our waking consciousness and begin today's journey. So let me begin by reading the description that was posted online for today. The theme is Streaming the Future, Redeeming the Past. And here's what we put out. Many people are feeling anxious and perplexed and asking themselves, what on earth is going on and why is it so hard for us to live in harmony with each other? The simple truth is that the state of the world at the moment is a product of our own thinking and behaving. Our karmic chickens have finally come home to roost, and we stand at a critical choice point where we either succumb to our fears and the selfish drives of our lower nature, or we dare to aspire and conspire with our better angels to create a more just and joyful society. One path plunges us into a period of even greater greed and darkness, while the other lifts and leads us into a more heart-lighted future together. The good news is that we have the inner resources and we have the requisite power to build this brighter future, where caring and sharing are the dominant characteristics. This is not a pie-in-the-sky fantasy, but a real compassion in action possibility on earth if we so choose. It all depends on whether we are willing and able to successfully harness the creative power of thought and the innate loving kindness of the heart as an invincible and transformative force for good. Sort of a powerful statement to put out, but I believe that's what's needed now. We are living in critical times, and we need to turn to ourselves our inner resources, our outer resources in order to make a difference. So there are two main areas of exploration today. One is this urgent task of creating a more just, compassionate, and joyful future based on a new narrative that utilizes the principles and techniques of creative meditation. And then we have the pressing need to redeem the past in order to liberate ourselves from prior negative conditioning, so that we may create the right conditions in which something new can emerge and flourish. So when you look at these two states, you could say that we actually live in a state of emergency as well as in a state of emergence. Now, some of the insights and stories and examples that I will offer this evening may have already been shared in other broadcasts over the past 3 years, but they are deliberately being re-emphasized and highlighted today because of the dire consequences we find ourselves in today as a species. And also, how I understood them a year ago is different from how I understand them today. And also, the disclaimer I normally give is don't believe a word I'm saying unless it resonates. But also, I am going to be presenting some of the Ageless Wisdom teaching. It's my interpretation of it. It's not the gospel truth. And I invite each of us to do our own exploration and find out how we make sense of being alive on Earth. So I'm going to look at the theme of streaming the future and redeeming the past through the lens of the ancient teachings that we call the Ageless Wisdom or perennial teachings. And there are three concepts I wish to name and to share my understanding on before we actually begin the journey. And these three are, number one, the cosmic magnet and the creative process of divine revelation. Number two, the law of the spiral. And three, the spiritual axiom that declares energy follows thought. So let's begin with the cosmic magnet. Some of you may be familiar with it, others not. The cosmic magnet is a concept taken from Agni Yoga. And it basically says that in order for the one life to know itself and to realize itself in all its fullness, it must first manifest externally, so that a conscious communion between the one and the many can occur, we being the many. So the cosmic magnet is that mechanism and spiritual process by which the one utilizes its dual nature in order to give birth to an externalized reality of itself, which becomes the third aspect. Now, there are many people who believe in non-duality. I'm talking here about the one life. This unified field has this dual origin, as the Agni Yoga teaching says. This is part of the generative mystery of creation, and I believe that the truth lies at the heart of every atom, every human being. It's the core of the subtle and cosmic levels of existence. So let me just expound on the cosmic magnet as put forward by Agni Yoga. The magnet, of course, has two poles, positive, negative, and these are the dual origins referred to in the teaching, and they represent the divine masculine and the divine feminine aspects of the one life. And because each of us are fractals of this one life, therefore we contain a microcosmic version of the dual origins. We contain both the divine masculine and divine feminine inside ourselves. And it's said that through the consummation of this sacred union of the divine feminine, the divine masculine, a child of the one life is born. And this child is called the light of consciousness. So I know these sound very high level, but for me, they're the context. It's the framework in which I seek to make sense of things. So my understanding is that each of us here on earth, we have an opportunity. Incarnated life offers us a sacred process that enables a progressive entry into greater states of wholeness, awareness, identity, and revelation of the eternal presence of the Creator or the God within. So you could say that we are actively engaged in the process that is the self-realization of the one life. And the self-realization occurs through the many realizing that they are part of the one, and sort of through a synthetic movement, returning home, returning from separation. So this dance of duality between the masculine and feminine, we can actually bring it down to an understandable analogy here in the modern world. We can witness this duality inside our modern technology. So just as everything in the created universe is said to be the offspring of the divine marriage of the masculine and feminine, so the infinite possibilities inside our new digital world are created by the diverse and limitless dance of ones and zeros. I mean, just ask any coder. It's what makes it possible for us to interact over Zoom. This limitless creation using ones and zeros. So in this case, the one represents the masculine and the zero the feminine. They actually depict it. One masculine, zero feminine. So we can view the number one as an erect line representing the direct, purposeful seed that can only be revealed as it enters into a relationship with what I would call the fecund field and the round receptive space of the zero. And I'm reminded of the master DK, who was the person who dictated the books to Alice Bailey. He sums up the mystery of creation in one of the books by saying, it is simply a result of cosmic sex, the perfect consummation of a communion between the dual origins of the one life. So the whole of the created universe is a consummation of this divine marriage at the macrocosmic level. So I only name that not to give a lecture on esoteric philosophy, but to say it's important for me to hold my life in a larger context. It gives greater meaning and belonging to it. So to summarize, when the circle of substantial love, the zero, this is the feminine field, is lifted by the focused line of will, represented by the number one, then the circle rises to become the spiral. And this leads us into the second concept I wanted to explore with you, which is the law of the spiral. Once again, this is taken from Agni Yoga. The law of the spiral is the dynamic movement by which life evolves at all levels, whether it's the double helix of our own DNA, on up to the spiral galaxy, our Milky Way. So when you think of it in our own terms of evolution, when each of us has attained a certain level of consciousness, when we've attained the requisite creative tension between ourselves and the cosmic magnet, we create a bridge of resonance. We are then able to register the compelling call of the magnet, and it lifts our striving. It lifts us upward into a virtuous spiral. However, what happens when instead of choosing the evolutionary path of the expansion of consciousness, we are captured by our lower desires and we focus our life energy on the aggrandizement of the self, and we become enmeshed in matter, then a downward and constricting spiral is generated. It's not a punishment or a moral judgment. It's just a natural outcome of where we place our energy. And this downward spiral could be called a death spiral. And death is just the recycling of forms that no longer are useful. So I'd like to read a quote from the Agni Yoga teaching from the book Infinity, Volume 1, that references the spiral and the cosmic magnet, and then I'll sort of come back down to earth. But I just wanted to set the scene by quoting a little from the Ageless Wisdom teaching, because it is an amazing companion. It certainly helps me understand what's going on in my life. So this is Sloka, and Sloka are the paragraphs. Sloka 204. The power of the decision is directly proportionate to the striving and to that force which guarantees a decision that moves life. Thus is the fundamental cause of human action established. Thought and striving towards a decision give the direction to the entire stream of human activities. It is impossible to comprehend how people could sink into the darkness of consciousness which denies the link with the cosmic magnet, when all is sustained by the coalescence of magnetic threads in cosmos. The legend about the dual force, the dual origins, in one image is founded in this merging. The combining force is without limits. The two origins and the higher and lower worlds constitute the principles of the universe. Everything is fused by the creative force of magnetic attraction. And then Sloka 205, just to complete this. The cosmic force moves in a spiral. With basic might, the magnet propels forward in the spiral of the creative potential of energy. The circular motion is highly strained during attraction to the generative source. The attraction toward that point gives the impulse towards the far-off worlds. The striving to reach the ascending steps brings in the law of the spiral. And the circular motion becomes tensed as a magnetic force when the initial step is at a point which, upon completion of the circle, will coincide with the point of action. The evidence of the power of the magnet is called the creative principle. So basically what it's saying is when we bring our lives into a point of tension where we choose to be part of the evolutionary movement, we come into resonant relationship with that which is part of us, and we're a part of it, which is the cosmic magnet, the divine feminine, divine masculine, the dual origins of who we are. Now, moving on to the third concept that I want to explore. I believe that one of the most important spiritual statements ever put forward is this: energy follows thought. For me, it's key in understanding why my world looks the way it is and why the outer world looks the way it is and feels the way it is. And it's also a key to understanding why it is possible to reimagine and regenerate our world based on more soul-inspired thinking and behaving. So I believe if we truly are co-creative agents of the one life, then whatever we think has the effect of generating and shaping all outer forms. Very simply put, what we see on the outside is a direct reflection of what is being held and focused on in our thoughts, held in our mind, held in our heart. Therefore, the critical choices we are facing collectively will either lead us into an expanded, brighter future or lead us further down the rabbit hole of self-centeredness and separation. So now we're going to look at streaming the future. What is this future that wants to be streamed? I believe it's the eternal promise of life, which is always renewing itself. So we are complete with the old narrative. We've seen where that leads. There's now a new story vibrating in the ethers and seeking to be born. It's seeking to be anchored on earth. And this is the new chapter in this never-ending story of the one life. And it's always being beamed to us. It's continuously being transmitted from the soul. Also from the collective soul of humanity to us as its agents on earth. So really this future potential can only be revealed and manifested to the degree that it is consciously registered and intentionally articulated in our everyday life. So as energy follows thought, it follows that whatever story we tell ourselves becomes our individual sphere of reality in which we live and move and have our being. So this personally generated thought form, or mental model as it's called, becomes our worldview. It actually crystallizes into our belief, and it becomes the lens through which we take in data from the environment, how we draw conclusions, and how we respond to situations. So I'd like to sort of step it down another level. So we engage with life in accordance with the story we believe to be true. And so this inner narrative tells us about ourselves. It tells us about what we believe others are and the surrounding world. So this is our personal reality. And often we believe it to be true, rather than a current interpretation of a greater. So the question arises, what story are we each generating in response to the compelling call of life? And also, what story are we allowing to govern and direct our daily thoughts, feelings, and actions? I believe we're being called to co-author a new story. This is the task that we face collectively. And I think it would be highly advisable to inquire whether we are filling our minds with visions of fiery hope and a positive future, positive possibilities, or are we allowing images of fear and doubt to condition and to ultimately cloud and sabotage our lives? So let me illustrate this with some personal observations. So over the years, I've traveled extensively and I've spent many, many hours aloft with a cross-section of humanity. And my observations in wandering the aisles of airplanes and noting what in-flight movies were being watched revealed to me something that I found enlightening. What it revealed was that a preponderance of the stories being viewed was steeped in violence, carried a dystopian undertone that painted a very dire and disturbing picture of the future. And we all know where these come from. The phantasms portrayed on the screens are products of special effects. They come from the special effect department that uses computer-generated images, CGI, and we've all been to movies which wow us with CGI. And they bring to life the vivid ideas held within the mind of the scriptwriter and the movie director. Unfortunately, many of these ideas are riddled with fear and despair, and as we sit and imbibe these images along with whatever else we're drinking on board the airplane or in front of our screens, our lives can be easily imprinted and unconsciously conditioned by them. I'd like to declare very emphatically, the news story does not depend on computer-generated images. Instead, it calls for soul-generated images, SGI. SGI will shape a new light-filled future that is unfettered and free from fear, prejudice, and other limitations of the past. So soul-generated images and the precipitation of these images and the manifestation of them as a new reality, this forms the basis of the art and science of creative meditation, which is central to our work here at Meditation Mount. And I'm planning over the coming year to spend more time on what creative meditation is, because it's how we wisely utilize the power of thought, the power of the heart, to create these new memes, to create these new images that we then flood the ethers with. And instead of dystopian views, they're more utopian. As I say, they're not pie in the sky. They can be this compassion in action possibility. So I firmly believe we've not incarnated on Earth merely to watch movies. We're here as members of a grand ensemble of humanity, and each of us have been invited to star in this new story and to play our respective parts from the heart. And I believe that the character and part we play has been cast by our soul. So I believe that every incarnation we come in a new character for two reasons. One, we need to learn something and we have something to give. And in learning, we learn how to give more. Now the soul is the great caster. The soul is also the co-writer and the co-director of the new story, along with the script writers of the spiritual realms, who I believe overlight and guide its production. These are not disincarnate, disconnected entities. These are the different levels of consciousness beyond our visible sight. We call them the invisible realms. And as I've pointed out before, to the beings that occupy these realms, they don't see themselves as invisible. Just because they can't be seen by us doesn't make them invisible. They are substantial lives in their own right. So what I'm basically saying is life is not a spectator sport. It's more a full contact engagement. And we've been invited to participate. And as you know, if you've been on these earlier broadcasts, I like to throw in some analogies and images from nature because of my background in organic farming. So we could say that the seeds of new possibilities will only germinate and flourish inside a healthy psychological soil that is conducive to growth. So enriching the soil is the soul gardening work of redeeming and composting the past. So this is the redeeming the past. How do we make amends for what we've put in place that is not truly in alignment with what is really needed? So redeeming the past is a way of composting and releasing and freeing up the energy that it can be utilized in a new way. And I'll keep returning to this axiom that energy follows thought because it's so important, because it really gives rise to everything. If everything on the outside is a reflection of what's happening on the inside, maybe it's time to pay attention to what we're thinking and how we are transmitting thoughts and feelings into the ethers. So let's take a couple of examples. I'd like to look at this urgent need for peace in the world. Over the past number of years, we've witnessed tensions around the globe continue to mount. Violence continue to erupt, and it seems that revenge is chosen as an acceptable form of response to any conflict, either between individuals or between nation states. So my question to myself and to us here on the broadcast is, what does it mean to walk a path of peace and live a life of harmlessness? So it always goes back for me to where do I draw the line? If I want to live this kind of life, then where do I draw the line? For instance, can I sit back and demand that a nation cease its belligerent behavior, that it disarm, rid itself of all weapons of destruction, unless I'm also willing to look at the part of me that contributes to that, my own personal roots of aggression? So can I, in all good conscience, insist on disarmament and a cessation of hostilities without first being willing to dismantle my own entrenched psychological patterns of aggression and self-defense? So this is the work that we need to do on ourselves. Nobody else can do it. We can do it with other people. They can help us. But this is the deep work of clearing and redeeming our own past and realigning it to, if you like, a higher goal. If you like, conspiring with our better angels. So there's an unholy trinity of fear, ignorance, and separation. That's the real enemy, quote unquote. And so as long as there are aspects of my psyche cowering in fear and needing to be defending, I am unwittingly and actively subscribing to and investing in the maintaining of global military systems. I mean, the correlation between the personal and the global is really, really clear. And I invite you to think about this. If tomorrow morning when you wake up, you were to conduct a personal audit, how much energy would you and I discover that's being expended each day maintaining our personal defenses or fueling petty acts of aggression and criticism against others? The cost is truly staggering, energy-wise. Now, the cost of the arms race and war is staggering financially to the world. So traditionally, an arsenal of weapons is defined in terms of guns and missiles. However, what I want to put forward that on a psychological level, the cutting remarks and the negative thoughts we hurl at each other are equally destructive weapons that wound and they cause enormous harm. I know when I've unloaded sometimes, I sort of regret, oh my God, what did I just do? I didn't mean to harm you. So relationships are destroyed and trust among us is severely damaged by the launching of these psychic projectiles. So like rogue nations, we too are armed and dangerous whenever we lash out instead of acting from a place of harmlessness. So therefore we could say true disarmament begins with a personal peace process in which you and I promise to lay down our psychological weapons, lay down our arms, and we agree to live in harmony. The good news is the first step to global peace does not require a unanimous vote in the United Nations Security Council. All it asks is a deep personal commitment from you and I. So this is part of the work of redeeming the past and the present as a gift for the future. So we're talking about being in right relationship, not just with ourselves and each other, but right relationship with all of the planetary life. This is the rocks, the plants, the animals, the birds, our own essential nature, but it also embraces those other subtle realms, whether we call them the realms of the angels, the other subtle beings that are part of this multidimensional ecosystem of planet Earth. And I just want to quote some words by the poet Francis Thompson, who eloquently described the interconnectedness of life. You're probably familiar with this. All things by immortal power, near or far, hiddenly to each other linked are, that thou canst not stir a flower without troubling of a star. Basically saying all things are connected. Whatever we think and do doesn't just affect ourselves or our neighbors, it affects the whole web of life. And because of my connection with nature, I am extremely sad, not just at the wars between humans, but I'm sad at the war being waged on the environment by the forces of greed and crass exploitation. And with all conflicts, as we said before, the war on Mother Nature, the war amongst people, has both a personal and collective dimension. So returning to this theme, if we want to live in peace and harmony with all life, then it behooves us to examine our personal conduct and to locate the real roots of pollution in this case, if we're talking about the state of our ecology. Now, there are obvious culprits we can point fingers at and who exploit the common wealth, and their names are familiar. However, the blame for eroding the delicate ecological balance of the planet cannot solely be placed upon the shoulders of petrochemical industries and other toxic waste-producing enterprises. There is a subtle source of pollution and ecological damage that is much closer to home. It's me, it's you, when we're not acting from a place of harmlessness. So we abhor the noxious waste that poisons our atmosphere, our oceans, and our land, but we seldom stop to think of the individual acts of pollution that take place daily. So, as I mentioned earlier, each derogatory thought, each criticism, each negative emotion emitted is a poisonous release into the ethers that has a dilatory and destructive effect, as harmful as any chemical deposited in the surrounding landscape. Not only does it poison the outer world, but when we engage in this behavior, it also poisons our own ecosystem of self. So whenever our hearts and minds are filled with hate, we actually spew out harmful particulates. So the psychological climate of our planet is being adversely affected by our emissions collectively. And if you and I were to scan the mental horizons of our collective consciousness, we could perceive many dark thought forms and emotionally charged particles that are clouding the inner skies. I call this the acid rain cloud of the psyche. It's a very powerful corrosive force that's eating away at the social and moral fabric of our world. And we're demanding limits to emissions from automobiles, from airplanes, from factories, and yet we're failing to understand that the factory of the human mind churns out pollutants into the atmosphere each time we think in prejudicial ways about each other. And we bemoan the state of the world, the extreme weather going on, but we are creating inclement and extreme weather conditions inside the psychic atmosphere of society by thinking and comporting ourselves negatively. And as we said before, energy follows thought. Whatever we generate on the inside externalizes. So the extreme weather conditions, I believe, reflect the extreme state of disarray inside the human psyche at the moment. As the Bible says, we reap what we sow. So I believe that we are in dire need of what I would call a viable ecology of peace, a way of living together that is inspirational, practical, and results in Earth becoming a garden of plenty for all, in which the full flowering of the human spirit is possible. I believe we're being called to invest in harmless thinking and peaceful action. And this costs us nothing. In fact, it's a priceless gift to coming generations. If we decide not to invest, its absence will be a costly oversight that will invariably bankrupt the future. So a radical shift is required. And instead merely of identifying ourselves as human beings, I'm sensing a compelling call to expand my sphere of awareness to include the totality of Gaia, our planetary home. I've mentioned this before, but I'm sensing a call to move into a Gaian consciousness. So how will we articulate the difference between living as a human and living as a Gaian? As humans, we tend to go about our lives looking at the world as an external reality. Sometimes we don't even notice that there are stars in the sky because of the luminescence of the streetlights in the cities. And we see nature as something outside of ourselves. And we naively assume that it lacks sentiency and is devoid of consciousness. This is not true. The planet is a living being, it's a sentient being. And as Gaians, we think and feel and act within a deeply sensed knowing that the whole Earth is a sentient being, it's alive inside of us, and that we in turn live inside a whole spectrum of lives that make up this planetary gestalt that we call planet Earth. For me, it's that simple. As a Gaian, we could say we know ourselves to be a conscious fractal of the multi-dimensional ecosystem that constitutes the living planet. So the one planet, and we are the fractals of the one planet, just as we are the fractals of the one life. So as a Gaian, we become a microcosm of Gaia, if you like, a sacred space where life can know itself. And the true differentiation between the two states of consciousness is that being a human means that we live on the earth, while being a Gaian means that we live as the earth. Let me repeat that, because for me this is the shift. Human beings live on the earth. Gaians live as the earth. And when we live as the earth, we behave in a way that is not separative, that is harmless, that is generative. So when we realize that all things are connected inside a matrix of lives, we cannot cause harm to anyone or anything. And when we sense this greater purpose and meaning to life and know in our bones that we are part of a vast field of belonging, then this profound awareness creates a sense of inner peace. So to create peace for me means to expand, not just to embrace my sisters and brothers in the human family, not just the other lives, the animals, the rocks, the flowers, in nature, but to embrace the fact that our planet Earth is a sentient being, and we are sentient beings inside of it and part of its destiny. And its destiny is this compelling call of the future. This is where we're shifting into streaming the future, which is the title, Streaming the Future, Redeeming the Past. And I'd like to begin this final part by quoting from Rilke. Offers this insight. You must give birth to your images. They are the future waiting to be born. Fear not the strangeness you feel. The future must enter you long before it happens. Just wait for the birth, for the hour of new clarity. So when the future enters us, it then has to be registered and realized. And this is what I'd like to explore with you now. So going back to the ageless wisdom teaching, we're told that the soul is in constant meditation. It's patiently watching and waiting for signs of response from you and I. We're the earthly counterparts. The power and beauty of the soul is an inextinguishable presence that, like the sun, illumines and warms all that it touches. So our soul is continuously transmitting the purpose and potential of our divine nature, so that this eternal promise is imprinted upon our consciousness as a magnetic lesson plan for each incarnation. It's our map. Now, the map is not the territory. That's why we're here on Earth, to explore the territory with the guiding map that the soul provides. So the soul, if you like, live streams this radiant message of new possibilities 24/7. But sadly, many people are totally unaware that their essential nature is calling, and therefore they don't register these inner guiding signals of renewal and hope. And as a result, many people may languish in the dark and remain unimpressed by the soul for long periods, until its light finally breaks through the self-generated and obscuring clouds of doubt, forgetfulness, and self-absorption with which we have surrounded ourselves. So if the soul is constantly meditating, then the first order of business is to establish a conscious link between the soul and the personality that can function as a stable connection with sufficient bandwidth to download the note of the anima as it broadcasts to the incarnated personality. Now, in esoteric parlance, this connection that we're being asked to put in place is referred to as the building of the Antakarana, the building of the rainbow bridge. And the rainbow bridge, in all mythology, heaven and earth. Now, this work of construction is accomplished by opening the heart, choosing to live a life that is soul-inspired, and then steadfastly, day by day, connecting the lower and higher mind that allows intuitive flow to occur, for inspiration and wisdom to flow into our lives. So there's some building and connective work that has to be done. So using a gardening analogy, I could say that our task is to prepare the soil to receive the seed of our own sovereign self. And then we're invited to employ the appropriate horticultural practices that guarantee its successful flowering inside the garden of Gaia. Now, that's flowery language, of course, but for me, it's very practical. I look at my own life as a seedbed. Is my soil rich? Is it barren? Is it bereft of nutrients? How do I enrich my soil? And then how do I ensure that the seed of myself is brought into contact with the soil of my incarnated self, so that something can emerge? So we are part of giving birth to this new story, this new narrative. And I believe this new narrative is inviting us to ascend, once again, the spiral, to ascend to a place of deeper caring and sharing, and to expand our capacity to create a sustainable future. And new stories, to be truly new, must be born out of new thinking. So the material we use is not just simply a presentation of the old that's been repainted and polished. It can be recycled, upcycled, but as the Bible says, new wine needs new bottles. So I believe this is the urgent call of our times. We actually need a new mythos, a new creation story to inspire and guide us through the labor pains of the coming birth. The script of this new story is also referred to in the Ageless Wisdom teachings as the divine plan. The divine plan is the promise held within the seed of humanity, the seed that holds the destiny of the earth or the solar system or the cosmos. Once again, going back to David Bohm and his enfolded universe. The enfolded universe is everything packed into a particle of infinity. It's the promise held in a particular form, in a particle. And then this particle needs to be placed in the fields of time and space so it can unfold. Therefore, I believe, very simply expressed, our task is to unfold the enfolded promise of who we are, not just as individuals, not just as a species, but to support the unfolding of the enfolded promise of our planet. And the work of Meditation Mount is to participate in helping craft this story and helping birth a new civilization based on the qualities of the soul. So coming back to creative meditation is one way in which we can hone our craft as co-creators, co-directors, and fellow actors in this great unfolding spectacle. So I mentioned creative meditation. I'll just very briefly touch on it now because there isn't the time to go in depth. And then we'll return to this probably during this year and next year because it's really important. Creative meditation is how we can realistically dream of a better future. We can inwardly shape it and we can bring it into manifestation. It's really a toolbox. It's not just one thing. And I'll just give you a glimpse into the toolbox. When you open it up, you'll find techniques and practices such as imagination. Imagination is that which allows the cosmic ideas to enter into the earth through this bridge of the imagination. Affirmation, where we affirm the truth of what is. It roots it, it gives it strength. Receptive meditation, where we open ourselves, just as we did in the beginning of this broadcast, to create a field of receptivity. We become the receptive feminine aspect, and we invite in the positive masculine transmitting aspect of ourselves to provide us with new insights. Then there's the reflective meditation, where we take a seed thought and we reflect on it, we unpack it. We unfold the enfolded. And then there are other techniques called concentration, telepathic radiation or blessing, because once you've created all these thought forms and these memes and the promise of a better future, they don't just stay inside us. They need to be transmitted into the ethers so they can saturate the ethers. And we do this by telepathic radiation. Blessing. Now, creative meditation is based as well on a preferred future that is made up of the principles and pathways that we hold as our core work here at Meditation Mount. We've gone over these many times for those of you who have been on previous broadcasts. For those who are new, let me just give you a very brief encapsulation. We have 3 spiritual principles here at the Mount. The first is essential divinity. It affirms that inside of us, there is a spark of the Creator. Therefore, we are fractals of this one life. The Creator lives in us. Therefore, we are a sacred fractal. We are sacred. We are a sacred part of creation. All life is sacred. The second principle is goodwill. Goodwill acknowledges the inherent goodness of the soul of humanity as a font of love. Because love is the lifeblood and the currency of all relationship. And then the third principle is unanimity. This is the scientific reality of the interdependency and complete coherence of the web of life. Now, these principles don't just happen in our lives. You have to work at them. You have to live into them. And so we have what used to be called the laws that we now call the pathways. So how do you live into the principle of essential divinity? You follow the pathway of spiritual approach, which is the upward path of striving to our highest potential. It doesn't have to be a religious path. It could be a philosophical. It could be a musical path, an artistic path. It's any path that strives to reveal and express our highest potential. And then in order to understand goodwill, we can tread the path of right human relations. Right human relations is the natural urge of the soul to connect and commune lovingly and respectfully with all life. And then we mention the principle of unanimity. To have that become realized, become real in our life, we follow the path of group endeavor. And the path of group endeavor is what we're in this month now, from February the 21st to April the 20th. We are focusing on group endeavor. And group endeavor allows us to experience in our bones that we are not separate, that we're part of one human family, we're part of one web of life. Therefore, group endeavor allows us to honor the interdependency by working together for the common good. So that, in a nutshell, is the work of Meditation Mount. And we'll come back to that in the ensuing months. So let me just begin to wrap this up, because I think this is enough to digest in one sitting. So as the past is redeemed, as we show up and take responsibility for what we've created in the past, we redeem it, we compost it, we recycle it, the old story fades, it loses its magnetism, it falls away. And when we don't give energy to something, it loses magnetism. It no longer holds sway. So I believe the soul of humanity is now calling out to all of us to rise together and in creative partnership with the subtle realms to participate in co-authoring a story that at each turn of the spiral reveals new and richer expressions of truth, goodness, and beauty. This is the Holy Trinity that the Greeks put forward. Truth, goodness, and beauty live at the heart of each one of us. So here at Meditation Mount, we believe that the building of a new civilization infused with the qualities of the soul is an artistic endeavor of the highest order that may take several hundreds or even thousands of years to reach its full flowering in a new golden age. However, we're not sitting around waiting. The time to begin actively playing our part in this emerging story is now. So I'd like to complete by saying, if you've not already done so, please act today and subscribe to a more positive future by signing up for continuous and free live streaming service from your soul. There is no service provider that can give you the connection of the Rainbow Bridge. This is what we have to build ourselves. So it's free. The soul is waiting. And we just need to connect. Getting online with the soul is what meditation is all about. And once we're online, then we utilize the creative faculties of our inner self, and we shape on the outside the dreams that we hold on the inside. So simply stated, the invitation is to make meditation and creative thinking a regular and regenerative part of our daily rhythm. So the theme today was streaming the future, redeeming the past, but they all converge in the present. Past, present, and future quiver in the moment, as Suzuki said. They converge and quiver in the moment. Once we've redeemed the past, it no longer is the past time-wise. It's a rich history that now enriches the future in the present. And when we invite the dreams that are the promise inside the seed into the present, we have precipitated the future into the present. So there is only the now, here and now. Be here now, as we know. So thank you so much for engaging in this inquiry. I hope that new insights flow. They were flowing into me as I was speaking. The reason for doing these broadcasts is to help each of us become more capable of responding to the call of the soul, more equipped, and also realizing the urgent need to say yes to life, wholeheartedly and fully, no half measures. So, all in. I'm all in with Gaia. So blessings, and thank you from Joey, who's the man behind the curtains making the magic work, and myself and all of the stewardship team here at Meditation Mount. We bid you farewell, good night, and we'll see you next time. Blessings. Namaskar.